We are starting in 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, Satish. Thank you. Today we have the second program of our Foxy PG Forum PG webinars. Last month you had preterm labor. This month, a very important topic, one of the most important topics in obstetrics for exam as well as your practice of point of view, anemia in pregnancy. We have Dr. Girijava. She will be introduced by Saswat Jani. Before that, we have our Foxy president himself present here to address all of you. So I invite Alpesh sir. We may have after some time Secretary General Jaydeep Tang may also join, and we have two other people also with us who are the PG forum coordinators. This time we have Shashwat Jani. He is a consultant gynecologist Ahmedabad, and we have young Nahariga from Agra, enthusiastic and very vibrant. She is heading the Foxy committee, chairperson also of committee, and now both of them are there to moderate this session and the question answer session. Now I invite Alpesh sir to welcome you all. Alpesh sir.
Thank you, Dr. Aswat. A very good afternoon to all of you. I welcome you all to this Foxy's PG Forum, initiative of Foxy 2020 for a specific purpose, academic plus overall development, overall growth, plus so many other aspects of post-graduation. I am happy to see the growth of PG Forum and enrollment of so many postgraduate students. We are nearly now, I think, nearly 2,000 postgraduate students in this forum. So I welcome you all for this program. Last time we had we had a program on, as Dr. Aswat has mentioned, on preterm. It was very, very successful program, and so many postgraduate students were benefited from the program. Today we have one more such another important topic, anemia in pregnancy. As per the WHO, the incidence of anemia in developing world is nearly 56%. In India, we can say the incidence is somewhere between 58.5 to 60% in different studies. And in India, it is the second most cause for maternal mortality. It is said that nearly 20% of the mothers are dying just because of the anemia. Not only that, it adds fuel to so many complications in obstetrics. So indirectly also it is responsible for many more mortality. So that is why this is very important topic for always till we can achieve our goal for anemia. And as Dr. Aswat has mentioned, this is very important not only for the, it's also important for the practice. It is also important to save many lives. It is also important for your exam point of view. And of course, in India, along with nutritional anemia, there is one more thing which we can eradicate, that is thalassemia. But our awareness, sensitivity is very, very important. It is easy to eradicate thalassemia. So there are so many causes. Dr. Girija will definitely talk to you about all these things. See, Dr. Girija is a great, great teacher. And we all always become a postgraduate students when she talks. So we also want to learn from Dr. Girija Wagh. And with this, I hand over mic to Dr. Saswat to introduce our today's esteemed faculty, a great teacher and a very good friend of mine, Dr. Girija Wagh. And I wish all of you a happy learning and I must congratulate all of you for the great work you are doing in this coronavirus pandemic to save our mothers, to help our Indian women in our country. Thank you very much, Dr. Saswat.
Thank you, Dr. Alpesh Gandhi, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Now I would like to introduce our today's speaker, Dr. Girija Wagh. Madam is a professor in Bharati Vidyapeeth Medical College, Pune, and she is a consultant at Apollo Spectra and Cloud9 Hospital, Pune. She is director of Girija Wagh Fertility Center, Pune. And now over to Dr. Girija, madam, for her talk on anemia in pregnancy.
Dr. Alpesh wants to say something. He's not heard.
Yes, sir. Before Dr. Girija madam starts her talk, I have one objection to Dr. Aswath. Dr. Aswath has mentioned Niharika very young, and Dr. Aswath, we all are young. Of course, Niharika is young, but we all are very young.
Young Talent Committee. He wanted to say Young Talent Committee. Okay. So, should I start?
Yes, please.
Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for logging in. At the outset, I want to thank Dr. Alpesh Gandhi for the faith and the trust he has in me. And yes, with whatever you said, it's a huge responsibility for me to get the right perspective about anemia in pregnancy. Looking at the innovations that you brought in to the Foxy Forum through the grave situation of the pandemic, we are all inspired and stimulated to deliver our best. Thank you also for Alembic for supporting, and Dr. Ashwath and his team, and Shaswat for being so kind to introduce me. And with much ado, I move on to discussing the topic of our concern today, the anemia in pregnancy. And I must welcome my 4 colleagues, my junior colleagues, Dr. Atishay Jain, Dr. Gitanjali Kumari, Dr. Neha Karumanchi. Her name is Karumanchi. I always tell her you must get inspired by Karumanchi, who put forth the preeclampsia theory, and Dr. Ishita Joshi. So these are my budding colleagues, and believe me, we are a pandemic, we are a COVID hospital. 2 of them are on call, but we decided to take this opportunity of sharing whatever little we know, and I hope we put up a good show of academics for all of you. So as we all know, anemia in pregnancy is a global health problem, and dilutional anemia is part of normal pregnancy physiology, and it can have serious adverse health consequences for both the mother and the child. And it is extremely critical, therefore, to differentiate whether it's a physiological anemia or whether it's a pathological anemia and look into it. And as Dr. Alpesh Gandhi said, that yes, today we have an incidence of 58.5 to 60%, which is very high because the global incidence is about 30%, and we require to look into that. But of course, with our efforts, we have been able to bring down it probably by about 10%. So in the today's talk, I have put up certain objectives such as definition, quantum of issues, pathophysiology, differentials, investigations, complications, management approach, and prevention. And friends, I would like to bring to you that I'm not going to discuss much about pharmacokinetics in my talk. That will be taking through the case discussion that we are going to have at the end. And what most I'm going to really stress upon is the clinical management, diagnosis, and the pathophysiology. There are few things more pathetic than those who have lost their curiosity and sense of adventure and who no longer care to learn. And that's very sad about anemia, because many times the moment we listen, anemia in pregnancy, everybody says, "Isme kya naya hai?" But believe me today, I'm going to get you a lot of new things. We all know that India has everything that is there to create anemia, and it is contributing nearly 87%. If you look at the South Asian countries, we have a very high incidence of anemia, especially in pregnant mothers. And this also contributes to a lot of morbidity. And you can look at the maternal deaths, nearly 80% of the maternal deaths due to anemia in South Asia. And you can imagine the amount of morbidity that would be. And direct has reduced, as our President Sir said, but indirectly it has also continues to cause mortality and morbidity. And many times it used to be believed in the past that there are no great maternal consequences, there is compensatory mechanisms, and I consider this as a sheer complacence, social, economical, political, to the tune that some people believe that there is some sort of a genetic modification, and today we really require to look into this. The fetus continues to take what it wants to is our belief, but is that really true? And we have to therefore always remember that our biggest enemy always is complacency, and we have to look into. Let's look at the very early embryo. We have to remember that at just about 32 days, there are transferrin receptors markedly increased in the trophoblast and the fetus, and can get its iron at the expense of the mother. And from the embryonic stage to the time of 20 weeks of gestation, to 20 to 22 weeks onwards, there is EPO production, erythropoiesis, and it is much absolutely expressed at 8 to 10 weeks of gestation. Maternal severe anemia can give rise to increased EPO from fetal kidneys, increased fetal erythropoiesis, increased fat cell volumes, increased blood viscosity in the baby, and a sluggish circulation, and that is something serious. And effects of this raised EPO plus PCV may cause brain damage, enterocolitis, hypocalcemia, hyperbilirubinemia, and hypoglycemia. And the babies may be born with hemoconcentration in a very, very large way. Today, there's a mounting evidence that infants born to iron deficient moms can produce long-lasting defects in their mental development and performance that may further impair the child's learning capacity, and there is defective myelination in iron deficiency and maybe some memory issues. And women, of course, are bearing the biggest brunt, and consequently, we, the women's healthcare providers. So we have to understand that ages since we've been writing iron complacently, spinal level, everyday affair, with not much change, we continue to do so, and we require to look at it in a different view, and that's what I'm going to put forth to you today. If you look at the NHS data, which has been published recently, it's been found that 50% of pregnant women are anemic, as our President Sir said. And if you can look at the contribution of maternal deaths, 20% straight on from anemia, but most of the other reasons also have a background risk or consequence of anemia. And over half of Indian women in the reproductive age also continue to suffer from anemia, contributing to infertility and so many other morbidities. What is interesting is that if you look at the NFHS 4 surveillance, which has just come up and got published now, that is surveillance which is published around 2014 to 2016, and we have found that of all the states, as far as anemia treatments are concerned, Tamil Nadu state is supposed to be doing the best, because they have a very, very robust antenatal program. And I think all of us require to take a cue from this particular experience. Now, we know that anemia is a state in which there is decreased production of RBCs or a decreased concentration of hemoglobin in the RBCs, and this causes reduction in the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood. And if you look at the definition of anemia trimester-wise, first trimester less than 11 gram%, second trimester less than 10.5 gram%. Please also look at the values of the hematocrit, which in our CPCs comes as PCV. Third trimester hemoglobin less than 10.5 to 11, and postpartum hemoglobin 10 gram per deciliter, where the hematocrit is less than 30%, is defined by the ACOG and the WHO. And we in our country usually follow the ICMR guideline, where we use less than 7 as severe and less than 4 as very severe, and we categorize anemia as mild and moderate anemia. Much ado has been paid to iron deficiency anemia of pregnancy, and therefore you can see that hemoglobin level is the one which is used to categorize. But are we really right in doing so? Because if you look at this particular pathogenesis of the stored iron in the blood, iron deficiency anemia, when it presents to us with hemoglobin being low, that time already there is iron depletion and there is iron deficient erythropoiesis, and this awareness is extremely important. But why we use hemoglobin? Because it is easily accessible and very cheap to perform. And you have to always remember your responsibility when we are interpreting the hemoglobin level and defining it, because hemoglobin is just the tip of the iceberg, and there's a lot more under this iceberg. And therefore, clinical judgment and not only laboratory diagnosis is extremely important. Example, if the baseline hemoglobin of 14 gram deciliter that decreases to 11 gram per deciliter, and there is macrocytosis, reticulocyte count, vitamin B12 and folate deficiencies have to be looked into. If the baseline hemoglobin of 14 gram deciliter decreases to 11 gram deciliters and there is no macrocytosis, then it can be iron deficiency and vitamin B12 and folate deficiencies. And in the postpartum setting, iron parameters may be more meaningful than only the hemoglobin concentration. So I bring forth to you certain very important terminologies. Anemia is called as reduced oxygen carrying capacity. And iron deficiency anemia is when there is deficiency of iron. And believe me, anemia, this iron, has nearly about 58 functions to perform in the body, from making the hemoglobin to improving the insulin efficiency and therefore controlling obesity to the myofibril integrity of the uterus. And ferroptosis is a new terminology introduced in 2012, which is a newly identified mechanism of programmed cell death mediated by iron and distinct from other known forms of programmed cell death such as apoptosis, and I'm going to talk about it a little. So when we talk of iron deficiency without anemia, iron deficiency, which is defined as serum ferritin of less than 12 mcg per liter, was present in 25% of pregnant women. So they had hemoglobin normal, but they had iron deficiency, and this also requires attention. Now, if you look at the reduced oxygen carrying capacity, what does that mean? If you go back in this slide, you'll find that the oxygen is carried with the moiety on the hemoglobin molecules, and there is a affinity and bonding, and then it is released at the tissue levels for the cellular metabolism. So when you say that the hemoglobin of the woman is 9 gram per deciliter, imagine the amount of deficit she has. Imagine the amount of hypoxia that she has in this particular low level. And this is what is absolutely called as reduced oxygen carrying capacity. And you can see on this graph, oxyhemoglobin depends on the hemoglobin level and its saturation. And you can see that these are the days of pregnancy against it and the amount of oxygen saturation that is essential. So there will be a shift to the left, and the right shift would be when there is reduced affinity, there is increased temperature, increased 2,3 dpg and increased H. And you can see that the oxygen carrying capacity would be dependent on oxygen. Now, what is hemoglobin and who carries the oxygen? Hemoglobin, and to a little extent, even myoglobin. Now, this hemoglobin molecules can transport up to 4 O2s, and there is a cooperative binding. Hemoglobin's affinity for O2 increases as its saturation increases. And when 4 O2s are bound to hemoglobin, it is 100% saturated. With fewer O2s, it is partially saturated, which happens in anemia. And oxygen binding occurs in response to high PO2 in the lungs. Now, myoglobin versus hemoglobin are two molecules which are known to transfer oxygen. And myoglobin, we all know, has a higher oxygen affinity, responds to the muscle's O2 needs. So when you exercise, then it will improvise oxygenation and delivery by the myoglobin. And it is just one subunit and one heme group of the hemoglobin, the moiety. And if you look at the fetal hemoglobin is another person here, another entity here, especially in the context of pregnancy, which is known to have a very high oxygen affinity and is known to facilitate oxygen transfer from the mother to the fetus. So this is how the oxygen gets tried. And that's the reason why we talk of iron deficiency, because iron is essential in creation of this particular erythrocytes and hemoglobin. So you can see that the body stores would have 1000 milligrams of iron, myoglobin and respiratory enzymes about 300 milligrams, and there is a loss of about 5 milligrams daily. In requirement is about 5 milligrams. Absorption 1 to 2 milligrams per daily, loss about 1 to 2 milligrams per daily. And you can see that it is essential for RBC production, bone marrow for erythrocyte production, and the reticuloendothelial system again for RBC formation as well as destruction. And if you look at this particular picture, which I'll always love to hold in front of my eyes, is that when we talk of the normal iron deficiency and no anemia condition, that means all the storage, transport, and the erythron iron are normal. And these are depicted by a normal ferritin level, good oxygen saturation, 40% saturation, hematocrit of 45, and RBC morphology being normal. However, as the iron deficiency continues, you'll find that first there is iron depletion from the storage, and that is the time when usually our women embark onto pregnancy. Then there is iron deficient erythropoiesis, and then actually the iron deficiency anemia, which is markedly seen by hemoglobin. So if you look at the characteristics, it is characterized by low serum iron and ferritin, decreased hemoglobin and hematocrit and MCV, and you can see that there is a microcytic hypochromic. You can see that there are small cells and there are hypochromic pale cells on the peripheral blood smear. Blood smears always give us a lot of clues, and what we have to remember that in pregnancy you also have other challenging things, like there can be schistiocytes which are because of MAHA, the microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. There can be spherocytosis where there is autoimmune hemolytic anemia, and there can be sickle red cells, the typical sickle cell disease in certain parts of our country where the hemoglobin undergoes sickling in oxygen deprivation condition, and these will be definitely diagnosed by a peripheral blood smear. Now, if you remember, I had mentioned to you about ferroptosis, and this is one wonderful publication where it has been found that iron deficiency causes a problem, but iron overload also can be a problem. And this overload is known to cause lipid peroxidation of cell membranes and cell death. This has been identified when we give an unprecedented iron overload therapy in patients of thalassemia. But this also has been identified to have a pathognomic situation in the etiopathogenesis of preeclampsia. We all know that anemia, iron deficiency anemia, and preeclampsia have a nexus, because it's believed that whatever complements are created because of anoxia, hypoxia, and preeclampsia, these are wonderfully cleared off by most of the women on RBC receptors are present on these RBCs. This is the Feinberg's theory. But unfortunately, some women are not able to do that, and usually these women have iron deficiency anemia or they have hypoxia, and therefore they are not able to do this clearance. Plus, we know anemia causes oxidative stress. But this ferroptosis is a concept when it has been identified that there is some sort of an issue at the time of implantation, when we all know that at 8 to 10 weeks time, there is a physiological hypoxia perfusion kind of a creation which helps in proper trophoblastic invasion. But in this particular study, they also observed that this is a low hepcidin level, there is inability to disposing of free hemoglobin and associated proteins, and this vista has definitely improved our interest in a different way. And I would request all of you to refer to this wonderful publication which has spoken about this, and this is the March of Dimes supported publication. So coming to the causes of anemia in pregnancy, there's physiological as well as iron deficiency anemia. And why do we require to have physiological anemia? It's probably for better perfusion and better flow of the blood, and also to safeguard the mother against the loss that would be in labor. And this increased blood volume and decreased vascularity helps in increasing the maternal stroke work. Now, blood volume and blood viscosity, the total blood volume is increased up to 40%, plasma volume 50%, and red cell volume only up to 30%. Please understand the difference. And this difference makes the blood a little hemodiluted, and which is essential. But then we as clinicians have to find out if it's physiological or this is pathological, and this can be identified by certain important parameters that we require to. And what are these parameters? Hemoglobin of 10 grams per deciliter in the second or the third trimester, RBCs 3.2 million per cubic millimeter, packed cell volume of 30% or more, and PBS, if you do, it shows normochromic, normocytic picture that is called as physiological anemia. And this can be your short note. Describe the physiological anemia and what is the purpose of it, and you can draw this wonderful diagram and write the entire theory about it. Now, why is this plasma expansion there? And you can see that the amount of plasma expansion as the weeks of pregnancy advances keeps on increasing. And this is again for better deliverables of nutrition, not into the mother system, but also through the fetoplacental unit to the baby. And that is the reason why this would happen. And this expanded blood pool of the mother is necessary for increased metabolic perfusion and also a reservoir for compensate for blood loss. Now, iron deficiency anemia would occur because of various reasons. It can be low intake, it can be infections or chronic illnesses, and it can be also be because of increased iron loss. And we all know that the iron, which is absorbed from the diet, does not go anywhere, but goes actually into the intestine. And on the very surfaces of the intestinal epithelial cells, actually the absorption would occur. And then it would get transferred through transferrin, and there are huge complex mechanisms. Many of them have yet not been understood. And this breaks up into a palatable ionic iron, which is then delivered to the bone marrow and the reticuloendothelial system, where it is used in erythropoiesis. Now, if you look at this, all the mechanisms of erythropoiesis, and I want you to concentrate on this particular upper part because we have learned a lot of it from here onwards till date. But the upper part seems to be modified because of inflammatory processes, because of underlying abnormalities. And there are now many progenitors, genetic predisposing factors, which have been, and interleukins, which have been identified causing this. When these are all overcome, then your erythropoiesis will set into, and then this particular patient will have the reticulocyte getting into the blood when we do the reticulocyte count, and then the mature RBC. Now, from here to here, it would take about 7 to 8 days, but this would be determined by what is the background risk and the situation of the patient. And why I have put in such a complex picture here is because I want all of you to understand that don't only look at hemoglobin, don't only look at serum ferritin. You have to look at the entire pathognomies of the woman who is presenting to you with anemia, and you have to treat. So don't treat the report, treat the human, the patient. So if you look at the iron requirements during pregnancy are total about 800 to 1000 milligrams. And this is the typical iron bank that we call off in the early pregnancy being 2.5 milligrams per day, 20 to 32 weeks, 5.5, and then it phenomenally rises as she embarks on the third trimester. And RBCs would require 500 milligrams, the fetoplacental unit 450, third stage blood loss 200, and the total requirement therefore is 1150. And you must be aware that the government of India has a guideline that every pregnant woman during her second trimester has to be given at least 1000 milligrams of iron. And this is one of the important bases why it has to be done. Now, if we look at the causes of anemia, usually when we look at the complete blood count, we would only look at the hemoglobin level. No, we must look at the MCV, because this MCV is going to help us in identifying which type of anemia it is. If it is less than 80, consider probably there is thalassemia, there is hemolysis, or something else which requires to be looked into, because iron deficiency also will have MCV low, but it will be much later in the iron deficiency happening. MCV between 80 to 100, maybe she's having bleeding or some chronic inflammatory disease or renal insufficiency, hypothyroidism, excess alcohol consumption, anemia, and I don't know, even I would like to place coffee here, because many women who take a lot of coffee and tea happen to have this typical type of a normocytic anemia. And then there is bone marrow recovery also after infection is found to be increased. You have to remember that vitamin B12 or folate replacement or iron replacement will improve the MCV. Now, macrocytic, if it's more than 100 ml, 100 FL, then it is vitamin B12 or folate deficiency, myelodysplastic syndrome, liver disease, hypothyroidism, and you also have to see that it would increase in hemolysis and bone marrow recovery. So we must look at MCV as an important marker, and review of the RBC morphology is always critical to the assessment of many anemias. A reticulocyte count in the normal range, especially the lower end of the normal range, may be inappropriately low in an individual with significant anemia and may suggest a component of impaired bone marrow function. Look at this carefully. Hemolysis typically is associated with a normal or high MCV and with some degree of macrocytosis because reticulocytes are larger than mature RBCs. And microcytosis is generally restricted to types of hemolysis with RBC fragmentation. And you have to remember that thalassemia, sickle cell diseases will also have microcytosis like iron deficiency anemia. And if we look at the normal values, the serum iron would be 115, iron binding capacity about 330, saturation percentage 35, and serum ferritin in females about 15 to 150, with RBC protoporphyrin 30 milligrams. And usually, most of the things that we do in our practices is the serum ferritin level, and that usually helps in most of the things. When we require to do anything more, or if you have resistant anemia, then naturally you must keep a hematologist also on board to identify. Now, pregnancy is known to exacerbate or unveil certain mild anemias, which all these while did not require any attention, but became overt during pregnancy. And this can be hemoglobinopathies like thalassemia and sickle cell disease. And as President Sir said, thalassemia can be controlled and eradicated, yes, because if you do a proper screening of these women, and if you guide them, and we can definitely do early detections and help them through preventing occurrence of thalassemia. I must also tell you that there's a huge program run by the government of Maharashtra in Nandurbar district where they are doing mapping of individuals for sickle cell anemia, and they are giving them cards so that they are educated not to have cross sort of an a marital relationship or get married, so that they can reduce the occurrence of sickle cell disease. RBC membrane disorders like hereditary spherocytosis, elliptocytosis, and related disorders can also be unveiled. So there are a whole lot of acquired anemias also which we must pay attention to. Megaloblastic anemia typically would be because of folate deficiency, and we know that we require to have 400 to 800 mcg of folic acid periconceptual. Preconceptionally, at least 1 to 2 months, all our recommendations say the woman should be folate replete, and this is usually associated with improper food intake. Vitamin B12 deficiencies characterized by macrocytic anemia, and this is usually seen because today we are seeing a lot of Crohn's disease, women using many proton pump inhibitors for gastritis, gastrocolitis, and bariatric surgeries are on rise, typically associated with vitamin B12 deficiencies. Other nutrient deficiencies like vitamin A and chronic helminthiasis can also cause anemia. There can be autoimmune hemolysis like systemic lupus and acute viral infections. Currently, we are in the middle of the pandemic, and we are now looking towards an occurrence of these things. There are a lot of pregnant women who are affected by this disease, and I'm sure our registry is going to give us an insight on this. And chronic diseases such as hypothyroidism and chronic kidney disease would also be causing acquired anesthesia. Now the question is, what is this business of megaloblastosis and macrocytosis? Now, megaloblastosis are large nucleated red cell precursors with non-condensed chromatin due to impaired DNA synthesis. We have to understand that there is so much of deficiency that they have undergone a change. The RBC has undergone a change because of an abnormality in the DNA synthesis. This is very serious. While macrocytes are enlarged RBCs where the MCV is enlarged, and this is a reflection of ineffective hematopoiesis, which affects all cell lines, but particularly the RBCs. And typically on the CBC or PBS, this would be diagnosed, where macrocytic anemia with anisocytosis, spiculocytosis. Now, what are these? These are reflections of hematopoiesis not going well. Large oval red cells, these are macrovalocytes, and oval jolly bodies, which are residual fragments of the nucleus, and hypersegmented neutrophils, and reticulocytopenia. So all of us basically should know these terminologies to understand the depth of the affection of iron deficiency and consequently anemia in our pregnant moms and their offsprings, and to what level we are dealing when we are looking at anemia. And what is very important is chronic kidney diseases. Many women are embarking on pregnancies with hypertension, with essential hypertensions, and we have to remember that they are also suffering from anemia, maybe because of abnormality of the inflammatory cytokines which are causing suppression of the erythropoiesis, and we may have to have a different approach of treating anemia in these patients. Now, if you look at the trimester-wise iron requirement of the patient, she requires about 1 to 2 milligrams per day during the first, because there's slowing of the gastric mucosa. Second trimester, about 4 to 5 milligrams, and third trimester, much more for the baby's growth. And this has to be borne in mind, and she would require much more even for delivery. So this probably is the rationale for the prophylactic iron therapy, where the physiological iron requirements are 3 times higher in pregnancy than in the menstruating women, and there is expansion of the red cell volume and so many other things. So this reduced oxygen capacity of anemia is known to be occurring, causing about more than 50% of women who have inadequate iron stores, and the requirements of absorbed iron increase during pregnancy. We have to remember from 0.8 milligrams per day in the first trimester to 7.5 milligrams per day in the third. An average requirement during the entire gestation is approximately 4.5, and an adequate iron balance during pregnancy implies body iron reserves of more than 500 milligram at conception. Now, there's certain deterrents of iron uptake and absorption, and these are usually certain things like nausea and vomiting of pregnancy. It's okay when it's in the first trimester, but many women are suffering from gastrocolitis, a lot of achlorhydria, giving rise to, there can be inflammatory bowel disease, women who have undergone bariatric surgery and other chronic conditions that we discussed about. And therefore, when we are writing that iron therapy, we must definitely find out, our question has to be, no, is she having anemia? If the answer to that is yes, why is she having anemia? Should be our next question, and accordingly, we must focus and target our treatment. So these are how the total iron metabolism and absorption that we already have dealt with. And if you look at the percentage of iron that is required, 65% is carried to the hemoglobin, 30% is stored as ferritin in liver, bone marrow, spleen, and therefore ferritin is a marker of stored iron. 4% is stored as myoglobin, and rest in transit throughout the body bound to transferrin and iron binding proteins. And this particular iron, when it gets absorbed, is then broken down into an ionic iron, and it is sort of stimulated or enhanced by vitamin C. And we have to remember that milk and antacid bind to iron and reduce its absorption, and so does calcium. And therefore, many times when I see in my practice, if I ask the patient, are you taking both the tablets together? Typically, they will say, yes, I'm taking iron and calcium together. So you have to ensure that they're taking their multivits or the prenatals right on time. Iron has to be usually given in the night. Calcium away from iron at least 6 to 8 hours, so that there won't be any chelation, and consequently she will have good iron stores. Now we discussed about the ferritin storage. What is very important about ferritin is in the body, in the liver, spleen, and bone marrow, and stored as ferric iron bound to an apoferritin protein molecule. And when it is needed, it is released from the ferritin and is then bound to beta-1 globulin molecule transferrin, the best diagnostic test for iron deficiency anemia. And if the ferritin level is found to be less than 12 to 15, it's compared to the normal level of 20 to 250 micrograms per liter. And ferritin is the acute phase protein, so its value may increase. Please remember, we know one of the tests in COVID has been mentioned as ferritin. If the ferritin is rising acutely, it's a sign that there is a severe disease or an infection. SLE, liver diseases, malignancy, and chronic renal failure, and could simply reflect inadequate plasma volume expansion in the pregnancy. Now, typically in our country, we have to look at the increased prevalence of anemia in tropics. And it's the most prevalent in tropics amongst women of childbearing age. And what is the reason? Before pregnancy, poor dietary habits, increased iron loss, increased loss in sweat, repeated pregnancies, excessive blood loss during menstruation, hookworm infestations, chronic anemia, and bleeding piles or dysentery are the reasons that we must definitely ask for these questions. And during pregnancy, again, the same things. Additionally, there would be low access to food, disturbed metabolism because of presence of infection or an inflammatory process or a response, pre-pregnancy health status if it's poor, and excessive demand, especially if it's a young adolescent who's pregnant, or rapidly recurring pregnancies or in multiple pregnancies. Now, hookworms are the ones which we have to understand that 58% of the adult population has helminthiasis, and hookworms and schistosomas are known to be responsible for iron deficiency anemia. And it's a good practice to therefore give anti-helminthics, and the dosages are typically albendazole, which is recommended by the government of India now, bebendazole 500 milligram single dose or 100 milligram twice daily for 3 days, and parenteral palmate is a single dose based if the dose is repeated on the next 2 consecutive days. And all these are best given after 12 weeks of gestation. And it's always a good practice to give them at the time of 12 to 14 weeks and then repeat it again at after 24 to 28 weeks of gestation. Can you see what this picture is showing? This is showing RBCs which have been destroyed. And who is destroying these RBCs? The malaria. And malaria, we know the Plasmodium falciparum and the other malaria also, Vivax causes hemolysis of red cells and combined with suppression of erythropoiesis. And that is one thing that we also have to look into. There are a few tested hypotheses has been found that poor iron status may affect immune function adversely. Iron deficiency may increase the stress hormones norepinephrine and cortisol. Low hemoglobin concentration cause chronic hypoxia, which can affect the body's stress response, and iron deficiency increases oxidative stress of the placenta. And therefore, it's our responsibility that every woman is not only screened at every opportunity that she poses to us and is treated. It is very heartbreaking sometimes for me to see patients coming to us at 19 to 20 weeks of gestation with 2 to 3 sonography examinations done, but not a single complete blood count done. And I think that is something that we really, really need to change, because it causes a lot of serious afflictions to the baby as well as the mother, from NTDs to miscarriages, IUGR, premature anemia in infancy to IUFT. And the mother not only has a risk of dying, but has infections and so many other complications. What is very important that we need to understand is one of the most important non-communicable diseases, if at all we need to focus on, is above diabetes. Also anemia is what is my contention, because it causes complication both to the baby as well as the mother. Now, if there is a moderate anemia of less than 8 grams per deciliter, there is a rationale for treating, because maternal mortality rates are high, preterm births, LBWs are high, and many times these women are unable to bear blood loss prior to or during labor, and they can succumb, they can be abnormal presentation, and preeclampsia always and many a times is associated. Severe anemia, when the hemoglobin is less than 5 gram deciliters, below 14, then it can cause cardiomyopathy to the mother. A blood loss of even 200 ml in the 3rd stage produces shock and death in these women, and maternal mortality rates show a steep increase when maternal hemoglobin levels fall below 5. And severe anemia is defined clinically as a low hemoglobin concentration leading to cardiac decompensation. That is to the point that the heart cannot maintain adequate circulation of the blood and is breathless at rest. So what would be the treatment? Oxygen gradient influences the trophoblastic invasion. And please remember that the trophoblast forms in the early part of pregnancy. And therefore, every opportunity that you get preconceptionally itself, we have to ensure that she's iron replete. And we must start giving her, if not iron therapy, because today most of the guidelines are promoting iron during the 1st trimester also, despite it being a category B drug, because there is no harm being identified. At least you can give them nutritional guidance, increase their awareness so that they have better iron to take on their pregnancy further. Oxygenation is necessary throughout the pregnancy. Can you see this small little thing here? This is the electromagnetic microscopic picture of a small embryo in the decidual beds. From here to the formation of the embryo, to the growth of the baby, everything, oxygenation is necessary, and anemia therefore is going to be important. And the physiological iron requirements in the second half of gestation cannot be fulfilled solely through dietary iron, and therefore we have to give them supplements. And there has been this study from Shanghai which has shown that when women have anemia during the first trimester of pregnancy, they have increased occurrence of preterm deliveries as the pregnancy goes on, because the oxidative stress gets created there itself. And this nexus has been identified because of reduced oxygen carrying capacity leading to abnormal placentation, raised free oxygen radical giving rise to preeclampsia, giving rise to iatrogenic preterms, increased susceptibility to infections is increased to genitourinary and others, increased possibility of PPROM. Iron deficiency reduces the integrity of the myofibrils of the uterus, giving rise to preterm deliveries and later on postpartum hemorrhages. And severe anemia during the first trimester is a predictor of preterm births, and there's a 30 to 40% association found. So what are the surveillance for hemoglobin or CBC, and what are the timelines? Now, typically, it's always a good practice to ask the patient about previous diagnosis of iron deficiency, diabetes, smoking, tobacco usage, HIV infection, inflammatory bowel disease, multiparas, especially those with interpregnancy interval of less than 6 months, AUBs, underweight or obese, vegetarians, and always ask the patients about their dietary recall. It's always a good practice. The WHO says that all your antenatal visits, you must talk of nutrition and you must ask them about nutrition and what they are really taking. So at the initial visit, CBC, it has to be a part of your prenatal care. And if the patient is found to be anemic, it's good practice to do a serum ferritin and an HPLC, which will tell you about whether she has any of the hemoglobinopathies. And peripheral blood smear will also give you, if you don't have an access to HPLC, we can do a PBS and identify what is the problem. Now, if the woman has adequate iron stores, then you can routinely continue with a prenatal care. Iron supplements, of course, would be given to her with dietary guidance, and you can repeat her hemoglobin again at 24 to 28 weeks. But if it is found to be inadequate, it's always better to follow a close surveillance. In our typical antenatal care protocols, 12 weeks is the time when we are doing the NT scan, and the uterine RTPI can be the time when you also look at the serum ferritin and all these issues. And again, you can repeat it again at 19 weeks to identify what has been her hemodilution response, especially if the woman is anemic. Now, if the patient has been given iron, and again after a while you find that she still has hemoglobin which is low, then you must start and looking at first, is there compliance? Is there intolerance? Are there any issues, and do I need to further investigate her? Because before the pregnancy presents 2 delivery timelines, before 28 weeks, you must have come to some consensus within your care about the iron deficiency and the anemia management. The clinical features of anemia are typically lethargy, shortness of breath has become very important in the COVID pandemic, palpitations, chest pain, headaches, dizziness, and fainting, and pallor, tachycardia, soft ejection, systolic murmur is typically seen. And you must get into the habit of not going directly to the poor abdomen of the patient. Hold her hands, look at her eyes, look at her tongue, and you will find that there will be clues to chronic anemia, ignored by patients and many times missed by us, like aphthous ulcers, cheilosis, glossitis, and you can see that there's koilonychia on the nails, which is showing us signs of chronic anemia. And there is a systolic murmur, and if it's severely anemic patient, you must look for left ventricular failure. In a study on IDA, pregnant women in their second trimester were shown to have significant decrease in the QRS duration and increase in QTC, and anemia can cause, as I mentioned, cardiomyopathy, where there's left ventricular dilatation, systolic dysfunction, diastolic dysfunction, and even chronic heart failure. And anemia was an independent predictor of myocardial damage or subclinical myocardial damage and cardiovascular mortality. And you can see in this picture that there is a global longitudinal left atrial strain rate from an apical 4-chamber view of a severe iron deficiency anemia patient. So you require to give them a very close surveillance and diagnosis, as I mentioned, holistically, even outside the precincts of your pregnancy and delivery conglomerate. Now, microcytic hymochromic anemia is typically when there is excess cell division, shows low hemoglobin, anisopoikilocytosis where there is varying supply because of a sign of abnormal hemopoiesis, and pencil forms usually. There is no clue as to why they occur. So if you look at the laboratory findings during the development of the iron deficiency, typically all the levels will be normal here. But to begin with, there will be reduction in the serum ferritin. And as the anemia progresses, then you will have hypochromia first, and then you will be having the typical microcytic hypochromic picture. So when you see the MCHC, mark this, that this woman is definitely having a severe anemia. So microcytosis is a late finding of iron deficiency, and the absence of microcytosis does not eliminate the possibility of iron deficiency, and the presence of microcytosis does not confirm it either. And this has to be remembered. Typically, this is how we get a picture. You can see that this patient's hemoglobin is 7.3, and you can look at her other parameters. The MCV is 63.5, MCH is 18.7, and RDW is 21.5. And you can see that all kind of things come to our mind. Is she having iron deficiency, thalassemia, and how do I go about? Now, you must remember that if you're planning to do her HPLC for thalassemia screening, it is always better to first do a serum ferritin level, correct her iron deficiency, and then do the HPLC, because HPLC done in an anemic state can give you wrong results. So this is a very favorite slide which I put up most of the times, and this is a typical sort of an analysis that you can do whenever you find that the RDW, if it is more than 25, it is telling you erythropoiesis is increased, and that is a sign of anemia. If it is more than 19, it helps to differentiate iron deficiency from thalassemia minor, and HB electrophoresis by HPLC always after correction of IDA to at least 9 gram per deciliter should be undertaken. So iron therapy, we have oral iron as well as IV iron, and you have to be sure, you have to definitely ask the patient whether she's suffering from any of these issues that have been mentioned here. We know that the government of India gives us oral iron, which delivers about 30 to 60 milligrams of elemental iron, and many times that happens to be cost effective. But if the patient has any symptoms, then you have to make a choice of the correct oral iron depending on what the patient is. All our studies speak about ferrous sulfate, talking about 60 milligrams of elemental iron, and most of the government supplies deliver ferrous fumarate, and we have an access to many other salts, and this is something that we have to use depending on what is the access and what is going to be tolerated by the patients. Even IV iron therapy also can be used in certain situations. Now, when do you start iron? We know you usually start it in the 3rd trimester. And these are the various salts with their relative bioavailability. We are not going to go into details about this. You have to be careful when you're prescribing iron, and you have to talk to them about how they are going to take the correct dose depending on whether you're giving it as a prophylactic iron. Prophylactic iron is usually 60 milligrams of elemental iron daily, given for a period of 1000 milligrams per day. And prophylactic iron would be depending on how much is her iron deficiency. Antenatal surveillance in an anemic patient has to be more maternal for hemoglobin, complete blood count, infections, nutritional compliance, compliance to iron therapy, look for improvisation as well as deteriorating signs, and always do screening for preeclampsia and preterm delivery. Fetal surveillance through fundogram, fetal growth restrictions, preterm labors, growth scans, and Dopplers. Just don't look at anemia. Look at what is going to be the effect. As I mentioned, when your hemoglobin level comes as anemic, and ask the question, why? And then ask the question, now what is going to happen? And you have to keep them under surveillance. Intrapartum management is extremely important, as the labor should be supervised. This is a high-risk mother, and she has to undergo maternal and fetal continuous monitoring. PPH prevention can be undertaken by oxytocin, given as intramuscular as per the WHO and the FOXI guideline, or can be given into a concentrated oxytocin IV drip. Risk of precipitate labor is high, please remember, because of the myofibril theory and the inflammatory response I mentioned. Fluid overload also they are at risk at, and they are at risk of failure because of increased preload on a weak heart. So there has to be proper counseling and consent. Blood and the components have to be ready. Women is better nursed in a propped up position, intermittent oxygen to be given, and there has to be precaution to prevent infection and blood loss because these women are at risk of sepsis, and you have to monitor that labor, that they are not unnecessarily going into prolonged labor. Remember, they are also at risk of precipitate labor and injuries consequently, and they always should have an IV access. If the woman is found to be decompensated or who has severe anemia, it's always better to treat her in an HDU setup with the physician and the intensivist on the board, and you can consider, you must give her diuresis for helping her to prevent the preload. Now you can see here Mrs. Astor, who has come with a history of anemia, always between 9 to 10 grams per deciliter, once had 7 grams in her tins, suffers from chelosis, gastritis, and glossitis on and on. So what is going to be the workup? Naturally, we are going to work her up for the iron therapy as I mentioned, and we will be giving her therapeutic oral iron and see to the tune of 200 milligram thrice daily. That's the therapeutic dose. And this has to be given to this woman so that she will be able to, and then of course the compliance has to be checked. Now you can see that this is Tina Mahajan at 12 weeks with 8 grams per deciliter. You're going to ask her about full medical history, family history, and then you're going to see at her CBC. If she has low MCV, then you will be looking at a primary hematological test from the complete blood count you will be getting there. And if they are found to be less than 27, also look for other causes of anemia if they are there. If the history is negative, we are lucky. Sometimes they may have some, they think that we need not tell this to the obstetrician because our physician knows it, but we have to ask the patients many times about this. If there is microcytosis, low MCV, MCH tells you about microcytosis, hypochromia, target cells, inclusion bodies. Do the serum ferritin. If the serum ferritin is more than 12 nanograms per ml, you can do HB electrophoresis and HPLC. And this is where you will be looking for thalassemia, where you can see the HbA1c is more than 4%, and all this is how the report would come in. And that will help us in diagnosing beta thalassemia trait, alpha thalassemia traits and related disorders, intermedia HbS disease, and various other disorders. And it's always a good practice if you find this trait, you can also then screen the father of the baby. And if that also comes positive, maybe you may have to consider doing an NIPT or certain further DNA or genetic analysis of the offspring, and that can be a part of your prenatal screening. So if you identify a premarital or trimester or second trimester hematological analysis of less than MCH-A2 and HbA2%, then if it's excluded, genetic counseling, parents' genetic analysis, prenatal diagnosis, query termination of pregnancy, depending on if one of them are a strong carrier and there's a possibility, and this genetic mapping, you can get it done from fetal medicine specialists or genetic counselors, and then we can take a call on these patients. We have to remember that thalassemia is quite rampant in our country, and we cannot left, right, and center right iron therapy. Iron, it's been also found that even giving intravenous iron sucrose or FCM, if you're planning, always do serum ferritin first, because there have been a few litigations against complications which have occurred because of adverse drug reactions with parenteral iron, giving rise to complications, and then the question as to where was the iron deficiency proved. And without that, you must not just give these disorders. We have to also talk of various other nutritional parameters, and we have to remember that nutritional anemia contributes to about 24% of maternal deaths every year, and is one of the important causes of low birth weight. And this is an important concept that we have to currently understand, is the 1,000 days concept, which starts from the preconceptional period to the first trimester, to the second and the third, and the breastfeeding, which are found to be the critical periods for development of the embryo, fetal organs, and the tissues. Appropriate gestational age, post-delivery weight loss has to be encouraged. Inter-pregnancy should be more than 2 years, and general issues such as age at conception, energy balance, obesity, chronic disease, and infectious disease risk management has to be looked into. And now this is From Mila, you can see that she has tachycardia, her hemoglobin is 9.5, TLC 16K. She had a blood loss of 500 ml at the time of delivery. MCV is 86, platelets 1.8, and PCV is 32. Now, this is a challenge after 48 hours. We wonder whether this is iron deficiency anemia due to blood loss or whether she is going into sepsis. So we have to always look at even the postpartum situations where severe postpartum anemia is a complication of 5% of deliveries. Following delivery, women lose some amount of iron through breastfeeding and lactation, and also through inflammatory processes. And IDA has been associated with impaired cognitive function and behavioral disturbances also in postpartum women. And mother's iron status should be evaluated prior to discharge to monitor postpartum anemia. And definitely there has to be a continued surveillance for the first 6 months closely and the 1 year after delivery for anemia. So functional iron deficiency in postpartum period is because of limited absorption, compliance at high dosages due to adverse effects, low plasma transferrin saturation levels, and inflammatory reaction, typically in surgically assisted deliveries, leading to iron sequestration in the macrophages, decrease of intestinal absorption, and administered iron is not available for hemopoiesis. So therefore, we look at these parenteral iron therapies. We have the iron sucrose, which we are using for its normal molecular mass, and the new kid on the block is FCM. And you can see that these guidelines are there present everywhere, how you can use this particular parenteral iron therapy, maybe even for women, usually for women after delivery, before they leave your hospital. And blood transfusion is a recourse which would be taken only in case of severe anemia, just for her hemodynamic and cardiovascular stabilization. Sometimes throughout pregnancy, if her hemoglobin is found to be less than 7 gram percent, we may have to consider giving her pack cell volumes to prevent the fetoplacental hypoxia. And of course, looking at the guidelines, iron deficiency anemia during pregnancy has been associated with increased risk of low birth weight preterm deliveries. This is level B evidence. Severe anemia with maternal hemoglobin levels less than 6 has associated with many issues which we discussed just now: fetal cerebral vasodilatation, reduced amniotic fluid index, and maternal transfusion should be considered for fetal indications. And this we also have to remember. All pregnant women should be screened for anemia. It says level C evidence, but I think because many people in the United States do not screen their patients till they are 24 to 26 weeks, but we have a different formula in our country. And if you look at the FOXC GCPR, it says that hemoglobin estimation at the booking, antenatal visit, and repeat every trimester, dietary assessment and corrections, universal iron supplementation, parenteral iron therapy, anti-helminthic and anti-malarial treatment, and screen for adverse effects of anemia on mother and the baby. And we have to always aim to restore iron stores. So in conclusion, an effective method often deceives us into thinking that it is the only effective one or the most effective. And that was the purpose of bringing it forth to you some various other ways of approaches to the pathogenesis and the pathognomic analysis and understanding of this very, very common complacency-giving topic of anemia in pregnancy. Thank you for a patient presence. Yes.
Hello, Girija madam.
Hi. Yes.
Would you like to take the questions from Niharika, or doubts which have come, or you will finish the you have finished the case? You can finish the case presentation also, and we will take all the questions together. So you can continue with the case presentation. Niharika, be ready with after that. So let all the questions come. Then it will be easy for you to sort it out.
Yes, okay. No problem.
And, madam, you can call your whoever you want and then unmute. They will unmute and present the case.
Yes, come on. Team, come on. Put up the first case. Share your screen. I will just stop sharing mine.
Your screen is already stopped shared, madam.
Okay.
You call one name, madam. Ishida or Adishay or whatever.
Atishay.
Yes,
Atishay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Who is presenting the first case? Please put it up. Share your screen.
Yes, ma'am. Geetanjali is presenting the first case.
Yeah. Come on, start fast. We have only 2 cases, Ashwath. Okay? We are only going to
Okay, no problem.
Yes, ma'am. 1 minute.
Okay, meanwhile, while you're loading, I'll just start answering a few questions that I can see here in the chat box.
And Niharika will tell you, madam. She would have arranged it into.
Okay. So Niharika, let's start talking till that time.
Okay. Start.
Let's not waste time. Yeah.
Ma'am, we've got a lot of questions. Our first question is from Dr. Snehal Pakle. She's asking for chemo prophylaxis for malaria in this endemic.
Yeah. In the endemic, chemoprophylaxis can be in the form of HCQS or chloroquine, which is the normal standard. That doesn't need to change.
And ma'am, BP.
And it may not. It is not mandatory. It is not a mandatory thing. But if you are staying in the malaria endemic area, then you must take it. Yeah. It is a part, as mentioned by the Government of India guideline. Malaria has to be given in this area. Anti-malarial treatment.
Okay. Ma'am, Dimpy Modi is asking that the incidence of anemia in India in reproductive age group.
We discussed just now 50 to 60%.
Yes.
I did put up a slide. Yeah.
Madam, you can continue with the case and then Niharika, you can come back.
Okay, Niharika will hold the questions for a while. Let's have the case presentation. Okay, Gitanjali, come on.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, all.
Yes. Yes, Gitanjali. Okay, I think Gitanjali.
Sound is coming.
Good afternoon, all.
Yeah, come to the point fast. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Today we had a patient, Gravida 3 para 2 living 2. She presented for routine ANC care late in her pregnancy for safe confinement at Bharati Hospital. The aim of the presentation is to discuss antenatal care in a patient with anemia. We had Gravida 3 para 2 living 2 with 29 weeks 4 days pregnancy with reports suggestive of anemia. She didn't have any complaint such as weakness, loss of appetite, dizziness, palpitation, irritability, or recurrent infection that suggested of anemia. Now, her reports suggested hemoglobin was 6.6, that suggested of severe anemia. Her PCV was 22.6, which suggested hemodilation. Her MCV was 57, that was suggestive of microcytic RBC. Her MCH was also decreased. Her MCSC was also decreased to 29, which suggested of hypochromic RBC. Her TLC counts and platelet counts were normal, which ruled out pancytopenia. And her Menzer index was around 14. So this type of anemia picture is seen in microcytic hypochromic anemia. Now her menstrual history. She attained her menarche at 14 years of age. She had regular cycle, but she had complaint of menorrhagia. She used to bleed for 8 days. Now her obstetric history. Her first pregnancy was normal vaginal delivery, 7 years boy, at a hospital. There were no ANC, PNC complications. Now her second delivery was a normal delivery, which was a home delivery. She doesn't have any history of routine ANC, PNC care during the second delivery. This was a third pregnancy. She was registered at a local physician at around 18 weeks. She didn't take any ANC care during the first half of pregnancy. Also, she was non-compliant to iron folic acid therapy. She was detected with anemia at around 25 weeks of gestation.
The typical story that we have today. Yeah, currently.
Yes.
We always keep on having such pictures. Yeah.
Her past history. She has history of admission 1 month back for anemia, and she had received 3 injection IVIS. She doesn't have any history of blood transfusions. She doesn't have any history of malaria or any fever in the past. Coming to her personal history, she has no history of colorectal bleeding or passage of worms in stool. She didn't give a history of black colored stool that suggested that she is non-compliant to iron. She doesn't have any history suggestive of gastritis or pica. Family history is non-significant. She belonged to upper class, and she was the sole food maker in a family of number 5. Dietary history, according to her 24-hour dietary recall, she used to take around 1500 calories per day with total proteins of around 30 grams, and she had around 2000 calories deficiency per day. Coming to general physical examination, she's
you also ask her about her consumption of iron rich components in the diet, and whether she suffers from any gastritis, gastrocolitis, melena, bleeding, piles. All
Yes,
these
ma'am.
things also we must ask. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And we can see that the required, please put your slide back again. Yeah, it is very important that we have to identify that the requirement of pregnancy, it's important that the calories are to the tune of 2200 to 2900, especially 2900 in the lactating mother. Proteins to the tune of 1.1 gram per kg body weight, and that's so important per day. And iron to the tune of 27 milligrams per day, usually pan pregnancy, but if she is anemic, even more, to the tune of 5 to 6 milligrams as the pregnancy advances. So these things have to be importantly identified when you are looking at the dietary history, because most of us have protein deficiency and that can cause issues. Yes, Gitanjali, continue.
Yes, ma'am. Coming to her general physical examination, she was hemodynamically stable. Her pulse rate was around 88 per minute. Her BP was 110 and 80. Respiratory rate around 16 per minute. She had pallor. There were no signs of edema, cyanosis, lymphadenopathy, or icterus. She had no signs of chronic anemia such as glossitis, cheilosis, stomatitis, platinikia or chylonikia, or pigmentation over the knuckles. Her respiratory CVS systems were normal. Per abdomen, there was no splenomegaly.
Absolutely. That is something which I must congratulate you for looking correctly, because we must look for splenomegaly and we must look for all the signs of chronic anemia. Yes, continue.
Yes, ma'am. Coming to her obstetric examination, her uterus size corresponded to around 30 centimeter. Her AG was 88 centimeters. She had a longitudinal lie and cephalic presentation, and her fetal heart sounds were regular. Her speculum, cervix, and vagina were healthy. Coming to her investigations, her HP was 6.6, TLC around 12,000, and platelets were 3.62 lakhs, which was suggestive of anemia. Her peripheral smear showed microcytic hypochromic picture with anisopoikilocytis and few pencil cells and target cells, which was suggestive of iron deficiency anemia or hemolytic anemia, because we could see target cell and pencil cell. Now, her serum iron was 23, TIBC was 463, serum ferritin was 10, which was reduced, and retic count was 0.5, which was suggestive of iron deficiency anemia. Her HPLC was normal and sickling test was negative. So this suggested cleared out any hemoglobinopathy. Now her urine routine was normal. Stool for occult blood was negative, and stool routine was normal.
Absolutely. So we must look at the stool microscopy for even oocytes and ova and eggs, and we should also look for any occult blood. That's very important. Very nice of you. And urine routine only may not be enough. We are doing leukocyte esterase in our institution, I am aware of. But if not, we can also do a culture sensitivity, because there can be genitourinary infections. And what does this reticulocyte count tell us, Gitanjali, if you can tell us?
Remember, reticulocyte count is around 0.5%. That is, hello?
Yeah.
That is, retic count shows that the number of RBCs are there in the premature segment is decreased because of decrease in iron concentration.
What is the normal reticulocyte count?
Ma'am, it is around 0.5 to 1.5%.
Okay. Yeah.
Her peripheral smear showed hypochromia. You can see the first RBC, the central pallor has increased. So this suggestive of hypochromia, and the size of RBCs are increased as suggestive of microcytis. And you can see some pencil cells. Her USG was done, which was suggestive of single live pregnancy with satisfactory interval growth, and Doppler was within normal limits. Her baby weight was around 1.5 kg, and A5 was normal.
So at least now the baby was not affected.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So, considering the iron therapy, we considered giving her IVIS and nutritional therapy, and antihelmintics were planned. According to her deficit, iron deficit was calculated with the formula of 2.14 into hemoglobin deficit, that is target hemoglobin minus actual hemoglobin, into the body weight plus 500 is added for the reserve. 2.14 is a constant. It is total
500
blood.
milligram is added for the storage.
Yes,
yeah.
2.14 is the constant we take. It is taken out with the formula of blood volume into amount of iron per gram of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin deficit is target minus present HB, and weight of the patient is the pre-pregnancy weight in kg.
Okay.
So it came around 560 mg for this patient.
Okay.
So, a rationale for giving iron citrate is if the patient is non-compliant to oral iron therapy, or if there is a swift rise of hemoglobin is needed to maintain the oxygenation to the fetoplacental unit, or to compensate for the losses in liver. So we have to calculate the deficit for the iron. 200 mg is given in 100 ml of normal saline over 15 to 20 minutes, and the maximum daily dose which can be given is around 200 mg. There are some adverse drug reactions which can occur, which we have to look for. Could include nausea, itching, diarrhea, vomiting, allergic reaction, and metallic taste. Rarely, this can also cause chest pain, dyspnea, angioedema, or urticaria.
And why don't we give it for more than 20 minutes, Gitanjali? Can you tell us what happens if you give iron sucrose for a longer duration of time?
Ma'am, the iron is in ferrous form. It is reduced in ferric form. This decreases the bioavailability if we keep it for longer time.
What is more important? What else it happens? It causes release of free oxygen.
Free oxygen radical that can cause harmful
release can cause more harm to the patient. So you have to finish it within 15 to 20 minutes.
20 minutes. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
No. Most common worms that infection is common is roundworms. The worm takes up around 0.5 ml blood per day per worm. So the drugs which are available for is mebendazole, which can be given 100 mg BD for 3 days, or albendazole 400 mg single dose, or pyrantel famotide is a category C drug. Now we have nutritional therapy. We should encourage the patient to consume iron-rich diet, or to cook food in an iron vessel and consume it. We have to look for the protein deficiency in the diet. Now we should guide her to take non-veg diet that is contains more of heme iron, and she should not be taking milk containing.
You will have to find an alternative.
Sorry, ma'am.
Yeah, most of them are vegetarian, so you'll have to find an alternative.
Yes.
So from vegetarian sources.
Yeah. Eat spinach.
Yeah.
No. We can supplement for iron, oral iron therapy, 100 mg of elemental iron per day in divided dose, and protein supplementation should be done.
Okay.
The iron-rich foods are listed over here include red meat, liver, egg, green leafy vegetable, dried apricots, lentils, beans, dried fruits, okra, peas.
And you remember, Gitanjali, in OPD, when we asked the patients what is the iron-rich diet you took today morning, what they give us an answer? I have taken an apple. Does apple contain iron? Does it contain iron? No. Okay. Yeah.
Obstetric care plan, we have to monitor her closely for adequate weight gain and compliance to iron therapy. Iron and protein rich diet has to be given. Iron and protein supplementation should be given. We can ask her to consume 2 eggs per day, boiled eggs per day. We have to screen her for asymptomatic bacteriuria, and you have to repeat her counts after 28 days to look for any rise in hemoglobin. Now for fetal outcome, we have to monitor clinically for IUGR. We can repeat her USG with Doppler after 1 month to look for growth interval, estimated fetal weight, and A5. Now to counsel regarding we have to counsel regarding the complications which can occur in iron deficiency anemia, such as preterm delivery, premature rupture of membrane, preeclampsia, and PPH. We have a high incidence of anemia in our country. Prevalence is around more than 40%, as ma'am already said in her presentation. There are various causes which can cause maternal anemia. That ma'am already covered in her PPT.
So how did you deliver this patient, Gitanjali?
Ma'am, she was called up for follow-up to her hemoglobin was around 10 when during 36 weeks of presentation. We took her for at term. We took her for normal vaginal delivery. We monitored her closely, and she was delivered without any complication. Female baby, around 3 kg. There was no complications such as postpartum hemorrhage and stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And at the time of discharge, how much was the hemoglobin?
Ma'am, it was around 10. HB was 10 at the time of discharge. She was discharged.
What was her post-natal surveillance?
Sorry, ma'am.
Post-natal surveillance. What did you tell her? She was discharged on day 5 with 10 gram. Yeah.
Hemoglobin, and she was advised to take
iron therapy. What was it?
Oral iron therapy was given, ma'am.
For how long?
3 months, ma'am. She was asked to follow up after 28 days with HB report. She didn't follow up.
Yeah. And
Uh,
Abhi, she's just loaded. Recently, so
yes,
she's
ma'am. Student.
So what should be the post natal iron cycle? What should you tell the patient?
We tell them to consume iron for at least 3 months to fill up the reserves that has been lost during the pregnancy. Even lactation also requires iron. So we tell them to consume it for 3 months and follow up later. And we discharge them on oral iron and calcium and tell them about a proper protein requirement that she has to consume food and dietary advice.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And then when should it be surveillance? Always a good practice to give a surveillance again at the end of 6 months. And what we must remember, we should not also overload the patient with because giving too much iron is also not good. Thank you so much, Gitanjali. That was a nice presentation.
Thank you.
We have now Atishay present.
Atisha?
Hello.
Sir, Neha will be presenting the second case.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Neha is here. Okay. Girija madam, your is off. Girija madam, your unmute you. Unmute.
Okay, Atishay. If you want, you must ask me questions. Okay. So I finished my presentation with the questions. I guess Gitanjali did not ask any. So please let me know if there are any questions which you think I must answer. Let's go ahead with the presentation.
Glass follow.
Yeah. So this is our own Karunachi.
Hi.
Hi Neha.
Hi ma'am. Good afternoon everyone. This is Dr. Neha Karumanchi. Today I am going to discuss a postnatal thalassemia case. Today I will be presenting a case of primary with beta thalassemia trait. The patient came to Bharti Hospital with complaints of pain abdomen and she has no other PV leak, no complaints of PV bleed. Fetal movements well perceived and she was admitted in hospital for the safe confinement. And her menstrual history, she attained her menarche at 14 years and she had irregular periods and took OC pills for 5 months. And her gestational age is corresponding by dates and by sonography. Obstetric history, married since 2.5 years, conceived spontaneously, and she was on her iron calcium and she took her injection TT1 and TT2. And she was diagnosed with beta thal trait in 3 months of amenorrhea during her regular visit in first trimester, and she had regular antenatal visits. All 3 trimesters are uneventful, and tablet Alban 400 mg single dose was given in OPD. Past history, she had no history of fever, joint pains and chronic infection. If we are discussing in a case of thalassemia, that's joint pain have a significance. It might have hemarthrosis. So we have to rule out the history of joint pain, and there is no history of previous blood transfusion. Because in thalassemia case, if it is a thalassemia major or something, and the ultimate treatment will be the intermittent blood transfusions, so we have to rule out this history of blood transfusions. And no history of admissions in hospital, no past significant surgical and medical history. Personal history, she had a normal sleep and appetite, no history of cravings and epigastric discomfort. She had a regular bowel and bladder habits, no history of worm infestations in stool, and no history of perirectal bleed and black color stools, and no history of gastritis and pica. Family history, no history of anemias in family. We will ask significant history in family because as a thalassemia, we know it's an autosomal recessive disorder, and we will take the HPLC of both husband and wife because it is an autosomal recessive disorder. It can affect the generations as a sequence. 25% can be unaffected and 25% can have trait, and 50% can have trait and 25% can be affected. And she belongs to socio-economic status of upper class. And dietary history, she is a non-vegetarian by diet and she consumes chicken and egg thrice in a week. If you see her 24 hours diet record, she consumes adequate amount of calories and proteins. However, there is a deficit of approx 800 calories and 60 grams of proteins. For a normal pregnant female, at least 2,900 calories per day and 1 gram per kg protein should be required. So she's lacking around 800 calories and 60 grams of protein. And
Neha, I will want to hold you here for a while. See, when we're talking of caloric requirements, we also have to look at the body mass index and the weight of the patient. If a pre-pregnancy has been normal and the BMI has been normal, then her caloric requirement can be is from 30 to 35 kilocalories per day per kg body weight. But if she is obese woman, okay, then we have to reduce this caloric intake to the use of 15. You know, that's what we do. No, whenever we are doing this analysis. So it cannot be a blanket 2,900 kilocalories. It has to be based on a trimester as well as body mass index. Okay, because while we're looking at anemia and malnutrition, we are also concerned about obesity and malnutrition. On the other hand, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay. Height is 153 centimeters, weight is 60 kgs. Her BMI is 25.6 kg. Patient on admission, patient is stable, pulse is 90, BP 120/80, respiratory rate 16, mild pallor is present, no edema, no cyanosis, icterus and lymphadenopathy, RS is clear, CVS, no murmurs.
I would like to ask you, Neha, what was the pre-pregnancy weight when she conceived? Any record of her first trimester weight we have?
Ma'am, her pre-pregnancy weight around 55, ma'am.
55. So you can see that she has reached term now, right?
Yes.
And she has only put on 5 kg of weight. So that means...
Actually, in pregnancy, around 9 to 11 kgs weight increases we expect, ma'am. According to her BMI, if her BMI is more, then we can expect 9 kgs. If her BMI is low, we can tell her a diet up to 11 kgs. Matlab she can increase her weight up to 11 kgs. So,
but in your patient, it seems that her weight gain has not been optimal. She's put on about 8 kgs of weight and her body mass index has reached 25.6 kilograms per meter square. So that was a pre-pregnancy BMI or BMI now?
Ma'am, this is, I think, first 3 months. First
3 months. Okay. So that was the first 3 months. Fine. Okay.
Ma'am, on per abdomen, the uterus corresponds to full term, cephalic, irritable contractions present at the time of admission, FHS present is regular, no splenomegaly and hepatomegaly. Ma'am, here we will see splenomegaly because in thalassemia, they can be extramedullary erythropoiesis. मतलब in normal erythropoiesis, in thalassemia major, there will be 4 alpha chains and there is no beta chains and there will be hemolysis, and whereas in beta thalassemia trait, there is no absolute absence of beta chains, there is decrease in the beta chains. However, on this process of erythropoiesis, bone marrow got exhaust and it will send it to the spleen where extramedullary erythropoiesis happens, where we'll get teardrop cells. And in thalassemia, there is a significant teardrop cells where we can, one of the significant for thalassemia cells we can see iron deficiency, speculum, cervix and vagina healthy, ma'am. PV per 3 centimeters, 80% effaced, membranes present. Ma'am, investigations mein HB 9.3. Actually, she's a term patient. According to the guidelines, in the term patient, at least HB should be at around 11. First and third trimester mein at least HB should be lower end of the HB should be 11, but HB is 9.3. TLC is 9,900, platelet 1.86. RBC count is 4.51. Here, if we discuss about RBC count, in beta thalassemia trait, almost iron deficiency and beta thalassemia trait have a similar picture. So we have to differentiate between these two. Beta thalassemia major we can easily rule out, but whereas beta thalassemia minor and iron deficiency have a close picture. Whereas in iron deficiency, RBC count decreases, ma'am. Whereas in beta thalassemia minor, RBC count increases because there is no lysis of this RBC in bone marrow because beta chains are still there. They are not absent. They are just decreased. Beta chains are just decreased in beta thalassemia trait. And if you see MCV, MCH and MCHC, these indices decreased in both iron deficiency and thalassemia minor also. MCV and MCH are decreased. PBS, microcytic hypochromic with anisopyclocytosis, pencil-shaped cells and teardrop cells. Here teardrop cells, the point where we can think of thalassemia. And Mentor's index. This is the important index where we can compare between iron and deficiency and thalassemia. Whereas in iron deficiency anemia, this Mentor index may MCV is decreased and RBC count is also decreased. So obviously Mentor's index will be greater than 14. Whereas in thalassemia, Mentor's index may MCV is decreased but RBC count increases. So it will be less than 12. Urine protein WNL, serum ferritin is 158, which is a normal. Serum iron is 92 and TIBC is 274. When we see in iron deficiency, indices decreases. See, serum ferritin iron decreases, TIBC increases. Whereas in thalassemia, almost these parameters are normal. HPLC. If you see HPLC of the patient, HbA is 82. In normal patient, the main 95% will be adult hemoglobin and almost 3% will be HbA2 and less than 1% will be fetal HbF. Whereas in thalassemia trait, we can see HbA2 increased 4.8. Which suggestive of heterozygous beta thalassemia. In husband, HPLC is normal. Here we did husband HPLC because it's an autosomal recessive disorder. So we want to see how the fetus is getting affected. In obstetric scan, a single live intrauterine pregnancy of 35 weeks, 6 days, cephalic presentation, AFI 11 centimeters, fetal weight is 2.7 kg within normal percentile, satisfactory interval growth, and Doppler within normal limits. Treatment during antenatal, we gave only iron calcium supplementation, iron and protein rich diet explained, anti-helminthic therapy was given. Obstetric care plan may we closely monitor her for weight, adequate weight gain and compliance to iron, and screen for asymptomatic basiluria and repeated her blood counts accordingly for every trimester. And fetus monitor for clinical IUGR, USG Doppler done to look for growth interval, effective weight and amniotic fluid index. Patient counseled regarding complications like preterm, PPRM, preeclampsia, and PPH. Labor details, no induction and augmentation was done. Since during her monitoring, FHS dropped till 80 beats per minute but recovered to 130. Again, it dropped till 90 and PV place is 4 centimeters and ARM was done, thick MSL noted. So patient was took for emergency LSCS in view of fetal distress. LSCS was done uneventfully. Intraop may moderate MSL noted, single loop of cord around neck, blood loss is around 550 ml. And there is no significant blood loss, it is only 550 ml. Post-op may patient hemodynamically stable, no active bleeding, no history of passage of clots. Baby details, girl of 2.8 kg with Apgar score of 8-9 and no NSU admissions, baby active and mother side. Treatment during hospitalization, injections, normal antibiotics injection, Supasef was given, Metro, no blood transfusions, and she was kept on tablet iron and calcium. Thank you.
Okay, Atishay, thank you so much, Neha. That was a wonderful presentation, and you explained all the interventions very well. I want Atishay to answer a few questions for me. Atishay, please unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, she mentioned that there was no black stools. Can you tell me what is the inference of black stools during pregnancy?
Ma'am, if a woman takes oral iron during her pregnancy, the unabsorbed iron comes in the stool and it turns the color of the stool as black. So this basically confirms that the woman was taking oral iron therapy.
Okay. So what is iron compliance? Anything else?
Yes, ma'am.
That can be a sign of gastritis also.
Gastritis or some kind of a malabsorption also.
Malabsorption also.
Yes, ma'am.
Another thing which I wanted to ask you in this particular patient is now she had thalassemia post delivery. Okay, why was there an we just give single dose of Supersafe normally. Why was this patient given 2 dosages of Supersafe in this patient? How do we change our antibiotic approach to these patients? What is our policy in the hospital? We have it written down. It is because of the MSL. You understand? We had given her metronidazole and MSL for that. Could you hear me? No. Could you hear me?
Yes,
I
yes.
can't hear you properly.
Okay. Okay. What about analgesic? What should be the analgesic policy in these patients who are anemic?
My voice is echoing actually.
Akshay, is there any laptop near you on? Your colleague's laptop is on means switch off that. If it is very near, it will echo.
Yes, sir.
Ask Neha or if they are sitting near you to unmute their laptop. Off their laptop.
Dr. Gitanjali, don't start your mic. That's what.
Atisha, should we think of any analgesic should be used carefully in these mothers? Because she has a thalassemia trait, she has a chance of hemolysis. So you can see in your, you made a choice of which analgesia. You will be using paracetamol preferably, isn't it? And we won't use any of the other ones, especially the diclofenac sodium.
Plain paracetamol we usually avoid in these patients.
Plain paracetamol will be given.
Yes, sorry, we'll prefer giving plain paracetamol in these patients.
Okay, you have any questions to ask me?
Ma'am, is there any role of serine transferrin receptor in anemia?
Means, what is the role means, what do you want to say?
Actually, we usually don't prefer using it, but in some books it's been given that it's a best indicator to use for seeing the cell status of anemia.
Usually it would be considered if it's a chronic anemia which is non-responsive to your regular iron therapy.
Okay.
Okay. Any more questions? I think we'll move on to Dr. Niharika now.
Niharika, it's all yours.
Thank you, ma'am. It was a wonderful, extensive topic, and I have a lot of questions from you from our chat. So,
Niharika, you have been our faculty. So, how did you find my team?
Ma'am, amazing team. I am one of your team only, ma'am.
Okay, yeah. Tell me.
So, Dr. Chamila is asking that can ferret carboxymaltose be given in pregnancy safely?
Yeah, it can be given safely because if you look at the, it's approved by the US FDA and even our Maharashtra state government has approved it. So we do use it and it is also approved by the government of India. But then there are certain reservations in few states. But yes, it is a self one. The problem with FCM is, however, it is a little cost intense.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, then Dr. Shweta and Dr. Ashwini are asking that what is the maximum dose of FCM and what gap should be given between the 2 doses?
Ideally, the maximum dose to be given at one sitting would always be 500 milligrams. Whatever would our pharma people would say 1,000 and all, give 500 and repeat after 1 week.
Okay.
Repeat after 1 week.
How frequently can it be given?
See, you have to calculate the deficit. No? 1,000 milligrams is what is necessarily needed in pregnancy. And usually the deficit doesn't go beyond 1,200. Sometimes in severe anemia, you may have 1,200, 1,400. So you calculate the deficit based on the formula and then decide.
Neha is asking that is test dose required for parental iron sucrose because most of the book says it's not recommended.
It is not recommended to do the test dose, but there have been some adverse drug reactions. And I think most of them have been because of improper administration over a longer period of time. But all the same, there can be batch related issues. And we did identify in the beginning of our practices that certain molecules did have problems. So if their molecular weight, categorization of 30 to 50,000 Daltons is well in place, usually they do not cause adverse drug reactions. So standardization at the pharma, the production rate is extremely important. So in that,
just a question.
Shashwat wants to ask a question. Shashwat?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, madam. Madam, if there is a batch to batch variation, then do we need to test before every administration of iron sucrose?
Yeah, but then how will you do the test dose?
That's
What-
why.
Yeah, so therefore there is no mechanism of doing the testing. So
Okay.
there is no point in doing the test. It was not like an intramuscular which we used to go through the intramuscular channel. Here you will have to give it IV and monitor the patient closely.
Okay.
But don't
Okay.
give IV sucrose. Please always be ready with your emergency trays and everything.
Yes.
And never give it without doing serum ferritin level. Please.
Yes.
Please.
Lots of people are asking that is deworming a routine in anemia?
Yes, Government of India guidelines says it is, and we all should do it as routine in anemia. We must.
So 6 weeks pregnancy with 8.2 grams of hemoglobin. Dr. Gitanjali is asking whether oral iron or diet is enough.
At what weeks?
6 weeks, ma'am.
Yes, oral iron, if at all she is able to tolerate, because most of the reasons why she would have less hemoglobin would be because of gastrocolitis. Give her a proper diet. You can give her low dose iron. It's not necessary to give her 60 milligrams of elemental iron. You can, there are a lot of 25, 20, 30 milligram formulations, those she can take, which she can tolerate. And then again at 12 weeks, do her surveillance and you can give, replete her iron completely.
So, ma'am, Dr. Neha is also asking that should we do a universal screening for thalassemia?
Ideally, yes, which I do in my practices, but not in all our practices. What we are doing in Bharati Vidyapith, which is a good representation of the socio-economic strata, all women who have hemoglobin of less than 10, we do their HPLs.
Okay.
That's the policy that we use there. While in my private practices, I'm using as a screening because I believe that thalassemia has to be prevented, if at all, and identified early.
Even many NGOs are doing it free of cost. In
Yes.
Red Cross Society is doing it free of cost.
We can take advantage of that. Yeah.
So Dr. Dipanjali is asking that what is your desired level of hemoglobin at time of delivery?
My desired level will be 11 to 12 gram per deciliter.
Oh, yeah.
My desired.
Why is there precipitate labor in anemia? Can you explain again?
Yes, precipitate labor happens because the myofibrils are weak and there is a prostaglandin resurgence in anemia. Typically, if you speak to our senior teachers, they will always say anemia will deliver on her own, don't bother. And usually that would happen. But the problem is they are at risk of injuries to the genital tract and they would have a component of atonic as well as traumatic PPH. And that is the reason why you have to be very careful with patients presenting with anemia and pregnancy in delivery.
And 2 or 3 PG students have asked about draft policy because that came in their exams. Know a few things about draft policy.
Draft policy for iron therapy is something which the government of India has on its website always revised. Before you go for your exams, always go to the NFSS surveys, ratify the numbers for a while because you write them in your exams and look at the policy which comes up. Usually the FOXI writes it in guideline as reference, or even the WHO writes and talks about India many times because we have the highest amount of anemia. So you will be talking about the prevalence, you'll be talking about the guidelines, and you'll be talking of complications and postpartum and interval, all that being in a proper structured fashion is the draft policy. And you cannot forget the prophylactic iron therapy. India is one of those only countries which is talking of giving 1000 milligrams of iron. Now there are many of our colleagues who are thinking, oral na de, let's give parenteral iron at around 17 to 18 weeks of gestation. Now this is something which has to go through study analysis. But we have a draft policy by the government which is promoting universal screening, therapy with oral iron, antihelminthics, antimalarials, and parenteral iron therapy. And we must talk about it all the time.
And what was the website? Can you tell again?
The Ministry of Health, MOFHW, where we get the guidance. And if anybody wants, I can send you a link for that also. Niharika, I can do it.
Gitanjali is asking what level of maternal hemoglobin actually the fetus starts getting affected.
What level of maternal? Whenever hemoglobin. See, as we went through the entire thing, we found that whenever there is reduced oxygen carrying capacity, the fetus will get affected. So according to the definition, the reduced oxygen carrying capacity is when the hemoglobin is less than 11 grams per deciliter. So you may not have growth restriction or weight and all coming out well, but you would have certainly MSLs or you may have, as I told you, about demyelination and such kind of issues which would be there, lack of thriving in infanthood, and all such things would be seen in the neonatology and the early infanthood.
Which iron tablet has the best absorption is also cheaper?
Ferrous sulfate has been studied, and all our pharmacology friends talk only of ferrous sulfate, but I know we have to innovate and we have to think of newer things, because not many women tolerate ferrous sulfate. So we will have to think of something better.
And which one is better for first trimester?
First trimester, I would always give that small ferrous ferrous citrate, because it gives a very less elemental iron and it is well tolerable. So it gives only 20 milligrams. That is what I normally give in the first.
Ma'am, Dr. Sudha is asking, would you advise to do hemoglobin for all your postpartum patients? And if yes, then at what postpartum day?
After 48 hours.
And Dr. Anita is saying that parental iron results in preterm labor. Is it true?
What?
Parental iron results in preterm labor. Is it true?
No, unless and until it causes any kind of a reaction.
And there is question from one PG that why blood transfusion causes preterm labor.
Yeah, because of prostaglandin.
What would be your best approach? Whether you like
response, acute inflammatory response. Yeah.
So, ma'am, what would be the best approach then? Would you like to continue oral drugs, or should we give one single shot of iron injectable?
This will entirely depend on my patient's compliance and tolerance to iron. If she just can't tolerate oral iron despite us switching and giving her all kinds of mechanisms, then rather than, because if she's suffering from gastrocolitis, she's going to lose more iron, and rest of the B12, folic acid, all the micronutrients are never going to get absorbed. So give her parenteral iron. That's a better option.
So, ma'am, Dr. Chandrakant is asking that you said there should be a difference between iron and calcium tablet of 6 hours. So how do you manage twice a day iron and twice a day calcium if it is given to a patient?
Yeah, so early morning, the first thing in the morning, they would take calcium, and they would again take calcium with lunch. Okay, with their late meal. That will be in the evening. And then after about 6 hours post early morning, they would take their iron, and once again in the night. But usually I will tell you something about Neharika. It's always better not to place iron in the day at all. And with that new theory which I spoke to you about the iron overload, it's always smarter to give iron on an alternate day. Give iron in the night on an alternate day. Give your calcium daily, and that gives a better compliance and better anemia correction and tolerance. Okay. Unfortunately, we require to have more studies. Many people are recommended. I recently read the up-to-date for this webinar, and it is speaking about alternate day iron therapy.
Ma'am, if it's in severe anemia in second trimester, which is hemoglobin less than 6, patient refuses blood transfusion.
Yeah, many Jehovah's Witnesses would also say no for blood transfusion. So you can give parenteral iron.
Okay.
I must tell you here that we have done a small study of about 60 cases in our center, where we gave parenteral iron in severe anemic patient between the gestational age of 12 weeks to 28. And it was found to be much more advantageous than the pack cell volume that was given. With the studies published already in my name.
Susan is asking that what is the importance of iron supplement in sickle cell?
What is the
importance of iron supplement in sickle cell?
Be it sickle cell disease, be it thalassemia, they would also have an underlying iron deficiency anemia. And I want to go back to that 6 grammer you talked about. Please do not write iron left, right, and center without thoroughly investigating the patient. Find out why she's having such a severe anemia, and then only embark on the right therapy. She could be having other type of anemias also. This should never be forgotten. Same holds true with thalassemia and sickle cell disease. Your iron stores and your iron studies will guide you whether you require to give her iron supplement.
Many guidelines for management of sickle cell crisis?
Yeah, there are many.
So she wants to know, Dr. Sudha.
Government of India का guideline ही है.
if PCD has to be given, then when should HPLC be given?
See, if you are going to give Paxil volume, or even if the patient is on iron therapy, you must take a gap of 24 hours to 48 hours before doing any studies. He's taking iron and then tomorrow morning going to the lab, not correct. So there has to be a gap of 48 to 72 hours, 24 to 48 hours, and then you must do the test, whether it's blood or iron. Of course, in acute, see, this would change in acute anemia. Always when the patient comes to you with severe anemia, it's always a good practice, collect her sample, keep it ready in the fridge, and then process it for HPLC, because many times cost and all these things also are an issue when we decide.
So ma'am, this is not related to anemia, but Dr. Harshita is asking how to prepare concentrated Cinto.
Concentrated Cinto, fantastic. Very nice. 100 ml normal saline was a blessing which we got because of iron sucrose, and we must be grateful to that company. And from that, we can deliver oxytocin, we can deliver your magnesium sulfate, we can deliver everything under this world. So that is concentrated oxytocin. So you don't cause fluid overload, and you are giving her oxytocin and a slow release. So 10 minutes mein to jayega usko.
So Gitanjali is asking, are there any teratogenic effects of iron on the embryo?
No, it's a category B drug, and none of them been found to have embryopathy. If at all anything, hypoxia and iron deficiency would cause an embryopathy.
I think, ma'am, most of the questions we have done. And Dr. Ashwath, would you take over?
Now we have been an excellent session, madam. Madam, if you'd have been a audience, clap for the whole session which we had. Excellent it was, and all your PGs were very good. They have been their cases were good. They discussed well, and all credit to you, madam, and all the PGs. And we had more than 450 participants, and all enjoyed the whole show. And any more questions we will send to you. And I thank Alpesh sir, Jaydeep, thanks sir, madam, as well as Niharika and Shashwat for doing an excellent work and making this successful. Also the whole Olympic team, including Atul Suri, their head, as well as Artika and Satish and the whole IT team of Olympic for doing this great work. And for the students, we will be meeting next month, Tuesday, and the speaker is Dr. Muralidhar Pai. It will be recurrent pregnancy loss and LPD, luteal phase defect. That will be the topic of the, it's also an important topic for the exam. So we will meet till then, bye. And thank you once again, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwath. I hope I give you adequate surprises which you wanted.
Thank you. No, so many new points.
Nice meeting you.
Nice. Shashwat, hi.
Hello, sir. Sorry.
Just hold on, please. Smile, everybody. I'm taking a screenshot.
Yes.
I'm taking a picture. Where is everybody else? Atishay.
Atishay.
All of you come.
Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, please come, all of you. All of you. We require to report it to the NAC. Yes, smile everybody. I cannot see Gitanjali. Gitanjali.
Where is Gitanjali?
No.
Hey, where is Gitanjali?
I don't know. Yeah, I'll send you the screenshots.
Okay, okay. Thank you, madam. Thank you. So, shall we leave for the day? Gitanjali has come, madam. Take the photo.
Please, please smile, everybody. Mucha fingers. Thumbs up, everybody.
Where is Ishita has got.
Anemia. Say, let's eradicate anemia.
Yes.
Eradicate anemia.
Okay, you taken the photo? Okay.